So, you are at a job interview, and the recruiter is happy with the conversation, and you are now requested to sign the contract. And that's what you were waiting for. You just want to sign the contract so you can start working. He goes with you to the contract. He tells you the name of the company, he tells you what the company stands for, he tells you how much hours you will work, where you will work, what the safety requirements are at work, your wage per hour and your wage per month, holidays, how to ask them, what to do when you're sick. He goes through everything with you. And after a half hour, you're kind of fed up, you just want to sign the contract and get things over with. So, when you come to the end, he asks you to read the contract again. But you tell him, sir, we just went through it. He tells you, please read the contract again. I'll give you 10 minutes. And he leaves the room. He leaves you with the contract for another 10 minutes. So you just check the contract again, you go to everything, and you already know what's written there because you just went through the whole contract with him. But then you see that there is this one footnote in the contract when it says that after signing of the contract, a probation period of 1 month will be entered. And you think, what? It's just a footnote. It's not in the main text. It's just a side note, but a side note is equally important because side note is also part of the contract. So because a footnote is often used to explain difficult words or text to elaborate on things that are not directly relevant to the main text. So you realize probation period. So you think, who cares what probation period is? You just sign it. So you sign the contract. You start working. After 1 week working, the employer tells you, sorry, contract is broken. And now you go to court with it. But then the judge tells you, sir, you signed this contract and you agreed to a probation period. And the judge tells you, here is a footnote that says, after signing a contract, probation period of 1 month will enter in. Sir, a probation period implies that the employer is entitled to fire you any moment if you do something they don't please. Anything that displeases them doesn't even have to be mentioned in the contract. A probation period is simply based on a subjective approval of the employer. So you have the formal approval, which is this contract, but you also have the subjective approval. And a probation period is to give an advantage to the employer to decide whether or not they want to continue with you. Let's say you start working, but you have a very difficult personality or you're a bit narcissistic. If the employer is not fond of dealing with your character, or if the people at work are upset with your way of dealing, or if you don't match with the culture at work, they can fire you. Because if you begin working and suddenly people don't match with you at work, it's going to be conflict at work. Or if the employer can't stand you after you start working for him, now he's stuck with you. So a probation period is to give an employer an advantage to fire people easily. Now look at this. You had no idea what probation period was. And where did it go wrong? When after you went through the contract, the recruiter told you, read the contract again. So when you went through the contract, you would have encountered this footnote. That was your chance to ask, what is the probation period? Now, the recruiter should have told you about the probation period, absolutely. But this is a trick, because if he would have told you there will be a probation period of a month, you would say, hold on a minute, probation period of a month? Oh, that means that the employer can fire me anytime he disapproves of me on a subjective level? Hold on a minute. So that means I have to risk getting fired for a month. So I have to make sure I please everyone else at work, even at my own expense, only then I can get the job. Why a probation? Why don't you just give me the job? If the recruiter would have put this in the main text, you would think, what? Probation period? Why is that? And then you would have asked questions. You would think, you know what, I don't want to take this. And then you would realize, why would they want a probation period? So they put it as a footnote, not in the main text. Now, I'm using this as a parable. When it comes to society, where there is uh, uh, Chinese society, Japanese society, South African society, Brazilian society. Society is what the Bible calls the world. Okay, but I'm using the common term society now instead of the biblical word which is the world. Anyway, when society recruits you, because what society does, when you were raised by your parents, that was the recruitment process for society. Now, society is a fear construct. It's a narcissist construct that adults enact. Society cannot just come and violate you over and over again, because then society will expose itself for the narcissistic construct really is. So society will trick you into agreeing with it at your expense. But society will always hint to you the scams you're entering into. Because, look, an example I just given to you, if there was nothing written about the probation period in the contract at all, and the employer would fire him for something subjective, then the employee, in this case, would have been taken advantage of. And if he would have gone to court, he would have won. But because there was a mention of a probation period, even in a very small way, that gave the employer an advantage to get away with exploiting that individual. Now, indeed, he was taken advantage of anyway because the probation period was not mentioned during the recruitment process. Neither was it mentioned in the advertisement, so they're wrong over there. By the other hand, it was mentioned, and because it was mentioned now they can use that against the victim. Now, that's how society works. Society comes with problematic expectations, and they mention those problematic expectations to you to hint to you that what you're entering into is a situation where the group becomes entitled to exploit you and then discard you when they want to. Society wants you to be easy meat. Society wants you to be an easy prey. Society wants you to be an easy victim. That's what society wants. Society wants people that will shut up and allow themselves to be exploited and just get along with it. That's what society wants. However, society will never say that openly, but society will come with problematic expectations. And it's when society comes with problematic expectations, you realize, what's going on here? Now, the issue is, most people, unfortunately also many believers, they don't notice the problematic expectations of society. Now, let me give you an example. Let's say that you move to, I don't know, some Pacific community. In a Pacific community, you see they have delicious food, they have joyful music, the people often work part-time, so they think, whoa, this is good, so people have more time with friends and family. So you think about moving there. But there is one thing about a community that you notice, and that is that nobody ever disagrees with their parents. Nobody. It's an expectation that you never go against your parents, no matter what, no matter how old you are. Now, at a distance, this sounds very beautiful. It sounds quite cute. But then, when you're back home in the United States, you tell this to someone, and your colleague at work tells you, hold on a minute. Let's say your name is Jeff. And he tells you, hold on a minute, Jeff. So you mean to tell me that in that Pacific community, nobody is ever allowed to disagree with their parents? Yet everything looks so beautiful and everyone's so fond of one another? Jeff, do you realize how problematic this is? So let's say your parents expect you to just don't go to school and don't study, don't get a degree. But you clearly see that it's important in its lifetime to have degrees, or at least it will benefit you. Are you going to agree with your parents against your own success in life? Or let's say that your parents expect you to marry a woman locally. But you see that the women locally are a bit materialistic. And you see that women from another Pacific community, that they tend to be more feminine and less argumentative. Are you going to agree with your parents against your own sexual safety by getting involved with a local woman who's likely to exploit you? Or let's say now that you have parents that are abusive. They feel entitled to cause harm to you because they raised you. They made effort in raising you, so they feel entitled to harm you. And what if your parents did harm you through abuse when you were growing up? Are you going to allow your parents to shout at you in your own house when you're married and you have your own children? So if your father wants to beat you, you're going to allow him to beat you and spit on you in public in front of your wife and your own children and be humiliated because you're not allowed to disagree with your parents? And then you think, indeed, this expectation is quite problematic. Now, this expectation of honoring your parents unconditionally is a common thing in many cultures. And it's very problematic. For example, even in churches you find this. You may ask someone, what if a parent is abusive or reprobate? Should a grown child put up with danger because the parent is reprobate? People say, well, still your mom, still your dad. But you ask them, should they put up with harm? And should they embrace harm in their lives and the lives of their own families because it's written on your mother and father? People from church can't answer that. They just dodge the question because they refuse to think logically. Now, let's go to another problematic expectation. This thing called privacy. Now, people say privacy is your right to control information about yourself. Now, this may sound logical when it comes to your medical information as well as your bank details, because that information can be used against you, or that information can be used at your expense. But hold on a minute. Let's say you are applying for a job. Or let's say someone's applying for a job, okay? He wants to work in a high school, and he just got his degree to teach in school, and you're willing to give the individual a chance. But then, a year after hiring the individual, you find out he has a criminal record related to child pornography. Now, you've hired him. What if this comes out? The school that you're working for will suffer reputation loss. The children are going to feel unsafe. And what if there are allegations of this man doing something? The parents are going to come after you because you're the one that hired the individual. But hey, during the recruitment process, you were told not to ask personal questions because that's his privacy. Okay, but because you respect this thing called privacy, which is something people make up, now you endangered the community. Or what if their parents were abusing their children, screaming at them, hitting them? And people say it happens in their home where they pay rent. It's none of your business. Stay out of it. Now, those children grow up with mental issues because of what they've gone through. What happens if one of those children now ends up in the dark side and they become a psychopath or a sociopath, harming the community? Who are you going to blame now? Well, when they were not a monster, just children, you decided, hey, I I worship this thing called privacy. I'm never going to just enter in other people's affairs. So you honor the so-called right to control that other people claim they have. Despite the fact that reality showed you intervention is needed. So what happened? You validated this expectation of the community to not bother other people's affairs, even though intervention was needed. And now that things escalate and the community being harmed, now you're upset. Think, where does this come from? I know where it comes from. It comes from you, and people like you who were too cowardly to intervene. So it's correct that data from people should be guarded when it comes to your password or when it comes to your bank details or your medical records. That's good. But when it comes to daily life, being involved with other people, you should know who and what you're dealing with. If someone never wants to tell anything about themselves, it means they just want an advantage over you. Why is it that they want to know what they're dealing with, but you just have to guess what you're dealing with? They only tell things about themselves they want you to know. So they want to control how you see them. Because by controlling how you see them, they also are controlling how you treat them. So what if someone only gives you beautiful stories about themselves? Of course, you're going to develop a positive image of them. But what if they're telling you these beautiful stories, factual or not, doesn't matter. What if they're telling those beautiful stories just to cover up the fact that they've neglected their own children or they neglect their own communities? They don't want you to know they've neglected their own community. They don't want you to know that, because once you know that, you will think twice about being involved with them. So they want to hide who they really are, just get benefits from you. Now look, I'm not saying people can't keep things to themselves. If you are a school teacher, you need to keep the answers to the test to yourself. If you're a police officer and there is a criminal investigation, you don't want the perpetrators to have an advantage, so you keep some information about the ongoing investigation to yourself and to people in the investigation team. So I'm not saying that people can never withhold information about themselves. But if they withhold information, there must be a legitimate, objective reason for it. Just saying it's none of your business, just saying it's my privacy, it's my private life, it's bullshit. People are entitled to know who and what they're dealing with. Think about it. What if a woman gets into a sexual relationship with a guy, and later the guy is a wanted terrorist? When the police arrest her and begins to question her, she'll say, I didn't know. But then the police will say, lady, this man is a wanted terrorist. He has killed over 50 people. Don't tell me you've been sleeping with him, even living with him, and you had no idea something was off with the guy. Even if you didn't know that he was a terrorist, there must be something about him that warned you that something's off. Then the woman will say, yeah, indeed, there were a few times he would just stay away from home without telling me. And there was a time he was calling this guy from this other country. He would talk to him for hours. And the police tells you, why didn't you ask him what was going on? And the woman tells the police, well, I just didn't want to upset him. Just with this, that. And then the police tells you, lady, you're sleeping with a man and live with him, and he's withholding stuff from you, and you don't think that's concerning? Look, even though you didn't commit a crime, the police can still keep you there and charge you for endangering your own community. Because you noticed that there were warning signals, but you just didn't pay attention to it. There are laws they can use against you for just that. For example, let's say in the case of child abuse. Let's say a child has been molested for a few years. And later, the uncle of the child is arrested. But then the prosecutor finds autonomy in it. This grown man was molesting this little boy for years. How come none of the relatives notice anything odd about the child's behavior? Because every child acts out when they're taken advantage of. How come nobody noticed any weird behavior from this man? So then the prosecutor figures out those people were covering it up. And then when the prosecutor has proof to show that people covered up, all those other relatives can be charged too. But people say it's privacy. F privacy. Seriously. Fuck privacy. I'm not going to use my language. Fuck privacy. Yes, you guard data that is sensitive. Absolutely. But you're not going to give people permission. You're not going to allow people to withhold relevant information about themselves from you. Information that's vital to how you relate to them. For example, let's say you go out to the disco, or you go out on a party, and this woman flirting with you. She's dressed in a sexy way, with makeup, with heels on. She has expensive perfume, and man, she's looking at you, and she's thinking, yay. And let's say you end up having sex with her, a one-night stand, and after the one-night stand, her phone rings. She talks, and she hangs up, and she says, oh, this is my husband. And you think, what? Now, what if the husband finds out that she cheated on him with you? The husband should be upset with her, but the other men out there will be upset with the one the woman cheated with. What if she has a jealous um, husband with no self-worth? That husband's going to blame you and he's going to come after you. So she involved you in her misery, which is her marriage, without your consent, without you being aware of it. But people say it's privacy. Yeah, right. Look, there are many, many more problematic expectations societies have. But too often we don't examine what people want from us. Look, people can expect things from you. Come on. We're social creatures. We need to be involved with one another to survive as a human species, so it's natural that people expect things from you. Look, if you live in Alaska and some people live in Chile, of course you're not going to expect that much from you because they're not directly involved with you. But if you live in the same town, in the same city, or you work in the same company, of course we're going to expect a little bit more from you because they're directly involved with you. There's nothing wrong with that. However, just because people are entitled to expect things from you doesn't mean they can expect anything they want. They must be able to account for their expectations. And too often, we don't examine what people want from us. Because we were not raised to examine people's expectations. Some people are, but those are exceptions. In general, we are not raised to question people's expectations. We were raised to be obedient and to comply. We were raised to be polite. We were raised to be respectful. We were raised to have manners. Manners simply means people expect something, give into it. We were raised to give in to people's expectations. But we were not raised to question people's expectations and to call people out on their expectations. Because when you were a child and you realized people were expecting something from you, but you felt uncomfortable with it, if you opened your mouth, it would say you have a big mouth. Some parents even say nobody asked you to talk. Nobody was talking to you. You were traumatized by society to not question people's expectations. When the group expects something, you don't question, you just get along with it to keep the peace. Now, there's nothing wrong with getting along with the expectation of a group. For example, if you're in Britain and you're driving a car or you participate in traffic, you have to go to the left. It can't be that Britain has this whole traffic system set around driving on the left and you want to drive on the right. No. Or if you're in a supermarket, you can't just run around to get what you want because you may bounce into people and cause accidents. So, of course, people can expect things from you, and there's nothing wrong with getting along with the expectation of the group or the expectation of other people. But just because people have expectations, that does not mean that they're entitled to have them. Just because you expect something doesn't mean you're entitled to that expectation, and it doesn't mean that others are obliged to give into it. Your expectations must match your reality, and they must be able to be accounted for. So your expectations have to be flexible and practical. They must be in harmony with reality. Look, it's one thing to expect a 5-year-old to be home before sunset. It's another thing to expect a 20-year-old to be home before sunset. A 5-year-old you can justify because there are child predators out there and kidnappers. So you want your child to be at home before, let's say, 8 o'clock. But if that child is grown now and is 20, how are you going to expect him to be at home before sunset? Or what if your child is a grown man or grown woman living in their own house? Are you still going to expect them to be at home? No, the expectation doesn't add up right now. You get me? So people can expect things from you, but the expectations must be examined. And that's the thing with the world. You have so many unexamined expectations that people hold high. And those unexamined expectations of the crowd are problematic expectations. So, another problematic expectation, and then I'm going to close this video, boundaries. Boundaries are limits you put on other people based on how you want to be treated, based on how you want things. Now, anyone can come with a boundary. Pedophiles will come with a boundary, namely that they don't want the children to talk about what happened to them. A corrupt police officer may have a boundary that he doesn't want to be exposed. So, a boundary is just a limit you put on other people. Okay, but just because you're able to put a limit on other people doesn't mean you're entitled to. People say if you have boundaries, you'll be safe. Hold on a minute. you putting limits on other people. It's just that you putting limits on them. They can refuse the limits. But then you have to enforce the limits on other people through consequences. And what if people fight back against consequences? And what if every human being on the earth begins to put limits on each other? So eventually you'll have everyone fighting each other because nobody wants to be limited by each other. You see how this doesn't work? So this whole concept of setting boundaries or enforcing boundaries, it's problematic because if everyone does this, nothing would work in daily life. If people think they're entitled to put limits on others and everyone begins to put limits on each other, people begin to fight to defend each other's limits. No, people need to get along, and getting along means you have common agreements with one another. And a common agreement must be based on the reality of the situation. So the whole concept of boundaries, private life, free will, all those concepts are narcissistic. But people don't question them. And let's go back to the parable I gave in the beginning of this video. Think about that recruiter, that employee. He went through the contract to the main text. And then the recruiter left the room and told them, you have 10 minutes to check the contract again. Well, society does a similar thing. Society does blackmail you, society does trick you, society does violate you, but at the same time society will give hints that what you're getting involved with or getting involved in is a cult where you have nothing to say. The question is, do you pick up the red flags society are giving to you? Because society doesn't want to be blamed for what they're doing to you. So society will hint to you the bad intentions they have as a group, so that when they act out the bad intentions, they will tell you, you agree to this. And that's what a lot of people don't realize. Anytime you participate in the unexamined expectations of society, you agree to them narcissistically exploiting you. You agree to that. Now, just because you agree with it doesn't mean it's right. They're still wrong for doing it. But you consented to them violating you. So, that's why I always tell you, I agree with Christ. That's why I always tell you, look at the bigger picture and to look at the context of a situation. That is something a lot of people simply won't do. Why? Because a lot of people are so emotionally invested in the problematic expectations of society. So, learn to look at the context of stuff, not just the content. In the parable I gave in the beginning of this video, that recruiter gave the content, which is the contract. But the contract had the context, and the footnote in the contract showed the context. So if he would have paid attention, so if the employee would have paid attention to the footnote, he would have realized, okay, this is a trap. I'm not going to sign this. I'm not going to work over here. The same is with society. Society will hint to you what they're going to do to you. And when you don't pay attention and get out of the bad situation, they will proceed doing to you what they intended to do, because they will perceive your compliance as consent. Even though it's not actual consent, it's symbolic consent. So stop giving symbolic consent to society. Where possible, you comply with other people in daily life. There's nothing wrong with that, but always do your best to get out of toxic and bad situations as soon as possible. Be at peace.